But the three dwarves. There once upon a time was a man who lost his wife, and a woman who lost her husband. And the man had a daughter, and so had the woman. The two girls were great friends, and often used to play together. One day the woman turned to the man's daughter and said,
"Go and tell your father that I will marry him, and then you shall wash in milk and drink wine, but my own daughter shall wash in water and drink it too."
The girl went straight home and told her father what the woman had said. "What am I to do?" he answered. "Marriage is either a success or it's a failure." True. At last, being of an undecided character and not being able to make up his mind, he took off his boot and handed it to his daughter, and said, "Take this boot, which has a hole in the sole. Hang it up on a nail in the hayloft, and pour water into it. If it holds water, I will marry again. But if it doesn't, I won't." The girl did as she was bid, but the water drew the hole together, and the boot filled to the very top. So she went and told her father the result. He got up and went to see for himself, and when he saw that it was true, and no mistake, he accepted his fate, and proposed to the widow, and they were married at once. On the morning after the wedding, when the two girls awoke, milk was standing for the man's daughter to wash in, and wine for her to drink. But the woman's daughter only water to wash, and only water to drink. On the second morning, water to wash in and water to drink was standing for the man's daughter as well. On the third morning, water to wash in and water to drink was standing for the woman's daughter, and so it continued. The woman hated her stepdaughter from the bottom of her heart. Go figure. And she did all she could to make her life miserable. She was as jealous as she possibly could be, because the girl was so beautiful and charming, while her own daughter was both ugly and repulsive. One winter's day, when there was a hard frost, and the mountain and valley were covered with snow, the woman made a dress of paper, and calling the girl to her, said,
"Here, put on this dress and go out into the wood and fetch me a basket of strawberries."
"Now heaven help us," replied the stepdaughter. "Strawberries don't grow in winter, and the earth is all frozen, and the snow has covered up everything. And why send me in a paper dress? It is so cold outside, and one's breath freezing. The wind will whistle through my dress, and the brambles tear it from my body."
"How dare you contradict me?" said the stepmother. "Be off with you at once, or don't show your face again until you have filled the basket with strawberries."
Then she gave the girl her hard crust of bread, saying,
"That will be enough for you today," she thought to herself. "The girl will certainly perish of hunger and cold outside, and I shan't be bothered with her any more."
The girl was so obedient that she put on the paper dress and set out with her little basket. There was nothing but snow far and near, and not a green blade of grass to be seen anywhere. And when she came to a wood where she saw a little house, and out of it peeped three little dwarves. She wished them a good day and knocked modestly at the door. They called out to her to enter, and she stepped in and sat down on a seat by the fire, wishing to warm herself and eat her breakfast. The dwarf said at once, "Give us some of your food." "Gladly," she said, and breaking her crust in two, she gave them half. Then they asked her what she was doing in the depths of winter in her thin dress.
"Oh," she answered, "I've been sent to get a basket full of strawberries, and I daren't show my face again at home until I bring them with me."
When she had finished her bread, they gave her a broom, and told her to sweep away some of the snow from the back door. As soon as she left the room to do so, the three little men consulted what they should give her as a reward for being so sweet and good, and for sharing her last crust with them. The first said,
"Every day she shall grow prettier.
the second,
Every time she opens her mouth, a piece of gold shall fall out.
and the third,
A king shall come and marry her." Agreed. Yes, agreed.
The girl, in the meanwhile, was doing as the dwarfs had bidden her, and as she was sweeping the snow away from the back door, what do you think she found there? Heaps of fine, ripe strawberries that showed a dark red against the white snow. She joyfully picked enough to fill her basket and thanked the little men for their kindness and shook them by the hand and ran home to bring her stepmother what she had asked for. When she walked in and said,
"Good evening,"
a piece of gold fell out of her mouth. And then she told what happened to her in the wood, and at every word pieces of gold dropped from her mouth, so that the room was soon covered with them. She's chatty.
"She's surely more money to wit to throw ground on like that,"
said her stepsister, but in her secret heart she was very jealous, and determined that she, too, would go into the wood and look for strawberries. But her mother refused to let her go, saying,
"My dear child, it is far too cold. You might freeze to death."
The girl, however, left her no peace, and she was forced at last to give in. But she insisted on putting her in a beautiful fur cloak, and she gave her bread and butter and cakes to eat on the way. The girl went straight to the little house in the wood, and as before the three little men were looking out of the window. She took no notice of them, but without so much as a "by your leave" or "by with your leave," she flounced into the room and sat herself down by the fire and began to eat her bread and butter and cakes.
"Give us some,"
cried the dwarfs. But she answered,
"No, I won't. It's hardly enough for myself, so catch me giving you any."
When she had finished eating, they said,
"There's a broom for you. Go and clear up the back door." "I'll see myself further," she said rudely. "Do it yourselves. I'm not your servant."
When she saw that they did not mean to give her anything, she left the house in no amiable frame of mind. Then the little men consulted what they should do to her, because she was so bad and had such an evil, covetous heart that she grudged everybody their good fortune. The first one said,
"She shall grow uglier every day."
The second,
"Every time she speaks, a toad shall come out of her mouth."
the third,
"She shall die a most miserable death."
agreed.
Agreed.
The girl searched for strawberries, but she found none, and returned home in a very bad temper. When she opened her mouth to tell her mother what had befallen her in the wood, a toad jumped out, so that everyone was quite disgusted with her. Then the stepmother was more furious than ever, and did nothing but plot mischief against the man's daughter, who was daily growing more and more beautiful. At last, one day, the wicked woman took a large pot and put it on the fire and boiled some yarn in it. When it was well scalded, she hung it around the poor girl's shoulder, and giving her an axe, she bade her to break a hole in the frozen river and rinse the yarn. The stepdaughter obeyed as usual, and went and broke a hole in the ice. When she was in the act of wringing out the yarn, a magnificent carriage passed by, and the king sat inside. The carriage stood still, and the king asked her, "My child, who are you, and what in the wide world are you doing here?"
"I'm only a poor girl," she answered, "and I'm rinsing out my yarn in the river."
Then the king was very sorry for her, and when he saw how beautiful she was, and that coins were coming out of her mouth, he said, "Will you come away with me?"
"Most gladly,"
she replied, for she knew how willingly she would leave her stepmother and sister, and how glad they would be to be rid of her. She stepped into the carriage and drove away with the king, and when they reached the palace, the wedding was celebrated with much splendor. So all turned out just as the little dwarves had said. After a year, the queen soon gave birth to a little son. When her stepmother heard of her good fortune, she came to the palace with her daughter by way of paying a call, and took up her abode there. Now, one day when the king was out and nobody else was near, the bad woman took the queen by her head, and the daughter took her by her heels, and they dragged her from the bed and flung her out the window into the stream which flowed beneath it. Then the stepmother laid her ugly daughter in the queen's place, and covered her up with the clothes, so that nothing could be seen of her. When the king came home and wished to speak to his wife, the woman called out,
"Quietly, quietly. This will never do. Your wife is very ill. You must let her get her rest all day."
The king suspected no evil, and didn't come again until morning. When he spoke to his wife and she answered him, instead of the usual gold piece, a toad jumped out of her mouth. Then he asked what it meant, and the old woman told him that it was nothing but weakness, and that she would soon be all right again. But the same evening, a scullion noticed a duck swimming up the gutter, and saying as it passed,
"What is the king? I pray you well. Is he awake or sleeps he well?"
And, receiving no reply, it continued,
"And all my guests, are they asleep?"
And the scullion answered, "Yes, one and all they slumber deep." Then the duck went on,
"And what about my baby dear?"
and he answered, "Oh, it sleeps soundly, never fear." Then the duck assumed the queen's shape, went up to the child's room, tucked him up comfortably in his cradle, and then swam back down the gutter again in the likeness of a duck. This was repeated for 2 nights, and on the third the duck said to the scullion,
"Go and tell the king to swing his sword 3 times over me on the threshold."
The scullion did as the creature bade him, and the king came to his sword and swung it 3 times over the bird, and lo and behold, his wife appeared before him once more, alive and blooming as ever. The king rejoiced greatly, but he kept the queen in hiding until the Sunday on which the child was to be christened. After the christening, he said, "What punishment does a person deserve who drags another out of bed and throws him or her, as the case may be, into the water?" Then the wicked stepmother answered,
"No better fate than to be put into a barrel lined with sharp nails, and to be rolled down the hill into the water."
"You have pronounced your own doom, then," said the king, and he ordered a barrel to be made lined with sharp nails, and in it he put the bad old woman and her daughter. Then he fastened down securely, and the barrel was rolled down the hill till it fell into the river.